evening and welcome to the April 19th, 2016 regular Salem City Council meeting. It will now come to order. If you'd please rise for the invocation and please remain standing then for the Pledge of Allegiance. Lord, watch over us this evening, allowing us to consider all that comes before us with wisdom and strength, and watch over all of us that is here on our journeys home. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mrs. Dickey? Here. Mr. Gall?
Here.
Mr. Paparotis?
Here.
Mr. Whitehill?
Here.
5 members.
Mr. Whitehill.
Move to excuse Mr. Nestor.
All right, is there a second on that? Mrs. Dickey? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick is excused. Mr.
Move to
Whitehill.
excuse Mr. Cushman.
Is there a second? Mr. Brown? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
All right, he is excused. Everybody's received a copy of the minutes of the April 5th, 2016 meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes? All right, they will stand as approved. There are no petitions and remonstrances this evening. We'll move on to receiving of visitors. Karen Carter, Downtown Sidewalks.
Good evening, Mayor, President, and council members. I'm Karen Carter, and I'm here on behalf of Beautification as I'm co-chairman. I have recently received the completed survey from Howes and Baird concerning the deteriorated sidewalks and curbs in and around downtown, which includes small sections of West Pershing and 2nd Street. Salem Beautification did request a survey, and I would like to thank council for having this done. I'm here to ask Mr. Brown, Chairman of Streets, Sidewalks and Alleys, if he could schedule a meeting with his committee to review this survey and to see if maybe even at a starting point, we could look at some of the more severe deteriorated sidewalks, especially in the downtown area, and maybe we could start possibly replacing them this year.
I think what we'll do, Karen, is, Mrs. Carter, I
Yeah,
should say, I
okay.
apologize. Known you a long time. But, yeah, I think there shouldn't be any problem scheduling a meeting. I'm looking right now, if it's okay with my committee members, to do it the last Tuesday in May, if that's possible. Mr. Gall, is that possible? Mr. Paparotis? Okay,
Do you have-
that's fine
what's
with
the
me. You
date?
want to make it
The
6
last
o'clock?
Tuesday at 6 o'clock?
The last Tuesday in May, 6 o'clock?
Last Tuesday,
Is that
6.
satisfactory with my committee members?
Yes.
That's fine. I'll make a note of it.
Anybody have a date?
I think the mayor's looking right now.
31st.
Yes. 31st. Also, I would like to announce that our big city downtown cleanup is this Saturday at 9 a.m. We need lots and lots of help. The paper has been very good to publicizing for us, and to meet at McCullough Park at 9 a.m. We're going to be putting down mulch throughout the downtown, and we need lots of help and wheelbarrows. Thank you.
And thank you. Next, Mary Lou Popa, 2 issues.
Sorry about that. I think I threw that on the floor when I was here before. Okay, I have, my first issue is, I have a question for all the council people. And at the last meeting, I asked if they would take a tour through their wards, through any wards, it doesn't matter, at large, through the city, wherever, and looking at the trash, or what they thought of the condition, I guess you would say, of their wards. And I'm wondering how many people actually, was able to do that.
My wife drove me around.
Pardon me?
We took a good look at the second ward, and I think overall, we look pretty darn good, because over the last 4 years, we've been pushing each other and talking to each other in the second ward about improving the looks of our neighborhood to restore values in the neighborhood and pride. And I don't see a whole lot of problems in the second ward, unless it's behind the houses where I can't see it. But in general, along the sides of the houses and in the fronts, we're looking pretty darn good.
Okay, anybody else want to make any comments on what happened or what they saw when they went through their own wards? Because it's not, to me, I did it. I went, numerous streets, and there's a lot of trash out there. There's a lot there on the streets, on the sidewalks, on the porches. So again, I would request that the city look again at having a city-wide cleanup. And I'm very serious about that, and we need another one. And, okay, my other issue, as I've been roaming around town lately, I'm aware of all the bags of leaves that are all over town. And people, with the weather change, everybody thinks it's spring, and they're out doing their yard work. And there's many, many bags. I alone have 5 or 6 at home. But all over town, there's people with bags of leaves to do something with. Is there a possibility, I guess, I need to know if there's a possibility that there could be a leaf pickup, a one final leaf pickup? I realize that, it was said that there would not be no more pickups. But Ken, I think that due to the weather, I think that it would be a good idea if we had one more of the leaf pickups. Because a lot of these places that you could look at them and they are in the leaf bags and they're not trash, and I'm quite sure that they are leaves. So is there something that we could look at to get some of these leaves picked up?
Like I said, we've announced it in the newspaper many times that we do not pick them up in the spring.
I realize it was in the paper, but since the weather changed, I think that people have very much been out and working in their yards. And I could give you some places where there is a lot of, all over town. It's not just in one area. So you're saying there's no way that there could be a one leaf pickup for all these leaves that are in town? Because it's gonna rain
We
too.
have nothing scheduled at this time.
Pardon me?
We have nothing scheduled at this time.
Is it a possibility?
I don't know.
You don't know? You're not saying,
I clean up my leaves, my trash man takes my leaves.
but most trashes, a lot of them don't pick up leaves. Pardon me?
There's only one trash company in Salem that I know of that will not take leaves.
Which one is that?
I'm not gonna say.
Oh, okay, I guess that took care of that, huh? So technically, then, there is not going to be another leaf pickup. Am I just
Yeah,
right to
because
assume
now,
that?
I only have 6 street department workers, and right now, we're working, trying to get all of our catch basins complete before our street paving starts.
Mhm.
So they're working every day doing that. Now they're trying to patch the streets that aren't gonna be paved, and so that's not even on their schedule. That's why we said we cannot do it in the spring.
Not even a one trip around town?
Mary Lou, I think he's answered the question.
Okay. And the other councilmen are in favor of not having a leaf pickup? I just want to assume that.
If you want to talk to everybody after the meeting, you can do that or call the council people. You have the right to do that too
Right,
and talk to them.
okay, I can do that, and I
Okay.
thank you for listening.
You are welcome. That concludes the receiving of visitors. Move on to report of city officials. Mayor Berlin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report tonight, but I'd answer any questions anyone might have.
questions? Thank you. Law Director, Mr. Zellers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also have no report, but I would answer any questions.
Just one.
Brown.
Rick, a while back, you told me that the scrapyard was up before Judge Pike on May 19th. Has that changed?
Mr. Brown, not to my knowledge, it has not changed.
So we're still intact?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, Attorney Zellers. The auditor advised me prior to the meeting that she has no report this evening, but we'll entertain any questions if there are any. Seeing none. Treasurer, Dr. Conrad?
Same thing, President. I'm glad to answer any questions. I know you get emailed the monthly statement on receipts, tax receipts. Glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for the treasurer? Seeing none, Safety Service Director, Mr. Kenst.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mayor Berlin, and members of council. I just have a couple of short things tonight. Just as a repeat, it's been in the newspaper, but this Friday, we will have our tire collection in the Timber Lanes lot. That's Friday, April 22nd. It'll be from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. That will be for passenger tires and small truck tires only. No rims on them, and there'll be a limit of 8 tires for Salem residents only. The other bit of news I was going to announce going to happen next week, but you notice our streets are starting to get torn up a little bit. Central Allied is back in. They gave me, we got a call yesterday with the nice weather we have scheduled for this week. They wanted to come in and start repaving our 2014 project that, as you know, we had problems with the material. So they have started. They hope to be out of here in a week, being completely repaved with the 7 streets that are now on the list. So, and again, once they complete this project, we will have a 1-year warranty from this date, not from 2014, obviously. So, any questions?
Mr. Brown?
That's a no-charge deal, am I correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dickey?
Can you remind me what those 7 streets were other than Southeast?
Mary Ann, do you have it? It's Broadway, Pershing, Lundy,
South Union.
South Union.
Was it Maple? Was it that end of Maple?
No.
Any other?
I gave Mary Ann a
That's
copy a
okay.
little earlier, and I didn't bring it with me.
Maybe you could just text
She'll
me.
probably have it in the paper.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Kent? Seeing none,
Okay.
thank you. Utilities, Mr. Weingart.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, honorable mayor, as you have probably read and also in the newspaper that the department has selected House and Baird Engineering, Salem, Ohio, to engineer the Snyder Road sanitary sewer extension. And the process, we were hoping to start this, the engineering at least later this year. And I've asked Mr. Gall to call a committee meeting for the Utilities Committee of Council to hear the process about the sanitary sewer extension. And that was my report for this evening.
Any questions for Mr. Weingart? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Council Clerk, Mrs. Bricker.
Thank you. I don't have anything.
All right, that concludes the report of city officials. Move on to report of standing committees. Finance, Mr. Cushman is not here. Is there any report that needs given this evening, Mr. Whitehill?
There is no report, however, there are 2 resolutions.
All right. The first will be number 20, that is tender into a contract to participate in the Columbiana County Cooperative Salt Bid for 2016/17 winter salt. The second will be number 21, and that is a resolution dealing with a partnership agreement with City of East Liverpool, City of Columbiana, and Columbiana County to administer and implement the Community Housing Impact and Preservation Program grant. Anything further?
No, thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Streets, alleys, and sidewalks, Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just bear with me as I try to read this 5 minutes of my meeting we held on April 12th. Both committee members were there. Mr. Kentz was there and did an excellent job participating in the discussion regarding the 2016 street paving program. Auditor Mrs. Betty Brothers was also invited, but could not attend to a meeting she had in Canfield that day. And we'll be sure to invite her to our one we're going to hold in June. Several residents attended the session, including Mrs. Karen Carter, Louis Dow, Gary Morrison, Mike Trainey, and Mr. and Mrs. Scott Cahill. Stonecastle residents Gail Brasco, Jim Senzik, and James Dye were present and addressed the committee. They expressed their concern that the paving of their street had never been completed. One resident moved into his new home in 2007. Like the others, he believes it's time to do something. I informed him that I had been trying to get the paving done for several years. Mr. Kentz informed those present that Stonecastle Trail would be done this year. They were very pleased to hear that. One resident asked if priority was used when paving the streets. Mr. Goh and Mr. Kentz exchanged constructive comments that led to some agreement on the issue. In previous years, funds available to pave some streets, including Stonecastle Trail, was a problem. The street has deteriorated a great deal since the base layers were installed. A friend of mine took me out yesterday and we drove the street, and it is indeed very bad shape. Mrs. Karen Carter addressed the committee regarding the pavement conditions on South Lincoln and other main arteries. She asked about state responsibility. Mr. Kentz informed her it was a city matter and council would have to consider the needed repairs in the near future. Mr. Mike Trainey and Mr. Gary Morrison expressed their plan to place the Stars and Stripes on poles above the West State Street overpass. Mike thanked Mayor Berlin for his help in getting information from ODOT regarding installing of flags. The problem was funding the project. The problem was quickly solved when Councilman Jeff Gall assured everyone that the Rotary Club would pay for the project. I think that's a great thing. The meeting was adjourned at 6:45 p.m. No additional meetings were scheduled at this time. However, I had scheduled one for May 31st at 6 o'clock to discuss with Mrs. Carter about the sidewalks and stuff downtown. And at that time, I will probably schedule a meeting in June for my committee to address the 2016 street paving project for the second time. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
I
Bruce.
had a question, if it's okay. The meeting turned out really nice for the streets and alleys and sidewalks, but I was curious, there was such a big turnout, and I didn't know how people were notified that ahead of time. I was just curious, and I was thinking about that this morning. It was in the paper? Okay.
The paper always publishes that.
Okay.
We need to give
It was a nice
the
turnout.
notice of the meeting. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Brown? Utilities, Mr. Gall?
Thank you. The committee has not met, but I am asking the committee to meet on May 3rd at 6 o'clock for the purpose of reviewing the request for entering into contracts to construct Snyder Road sanitary trunk sewer. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Rules and ordinances, Mrs. Dickey.
Did you skip traffic and safety?
Oh, I did. Thank you very much. Mr. Whitehall.
This would be anticlimactic. Mr. President, my committee has not met. I have no report, but thank you for asking.
Why didn't I know that? All right, rules and ordinances, Mrs. Dickey.
Okay, I didn't want to go out of turn.
Mr. Brown, did you have a question
Yes,
for
I
Mr.
do, thank
Whitehall?
you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Whittle, I've had people at church and other places I've been expressing their concerns about people riding bicycles after dusk. It's dark out there and you can't see the bicycle riders. And a lot of these people are crossing the sidewalks at intersections, not even stopping. I don't think they really know the laws of riding a bicycle. Perhaps you need to have a meeting. I'd be glad to attend and let you know what people are telling me about maybe doing something about this, because it is dangerous. Maybe we need lights on the bicycles, maybe more reflectors, but people are getting kind of concerned. Thank you.
They are welcome to give me a call, Mr. Brown. I am not going to schedule a meeting at this point regarding bicycles riding after dark.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Whitehall? Seeing none, Mrs. Dickey.
Okay, the Rules and Ordinance Committee did meet just prior to this meeting tonight. I will have a report completely written up about that for our next meeting. I also need to schedule a meeting for our May 3rd at 6:30 following the Utilities Commission to discuss Design Review Board changes in their ordinances and also residency requirements for employees of the city of Salem. And we are also going to, we are also going to revisit age minimum requirement for employing firemen, which we did talk about a little bit tonight.
Any
That's all.
questions for Mrs. Dickey?
Oh, maximum, yes.
Parks, Mr. Paparotis.
Thank you, Mr. President. My committee did not meet, and I have no report tonight.
Mr. Nestic is not here. I don't believe there's anything from Economic Development. Committee of the Whole, Mr. Nestic again, is not here. Mr. Whitehill.
Mr. President, we do have a resolution from Committee of the Whole for tonight.
All right, and that will be number 22.
Thank you, sir.
That concludes report of standing committees. There are no second and third, or do you have no second and third readings this evening? All right. Move on to the introduction of ordinances and resolutions. Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend council rules so that Resolution 20 may be considered tonight.
All right, is there a second on that? Mr. Brown? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
All right, council rules are suspended. Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the clerk read Resolution 20 by title only for its first reading this evening.
Madam Clerk, would you please read resolution number 20 by title only for its first reading this evening?
Being a resolution authorizing the mayor or fiscal officer to enter into contract to participate in the Columbiana County Cooperative Salt Bid for 2016-2017 winter salt and declaring an emergency.
Okay. Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend council rules so that Resolution 21 may be considered this evening.
Is there a second for that? Mrs. Dickey? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
All right, council rules are suspended. Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the clerk read Resolution 21 by title only for its first reading tonight.
Madam Clerk, would you please read resolution number 21 by title only for its first reading this evening?
Being a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Salem to enter into a partnership agreement with the city of East Liverpool, the city of Columbiana, and Columbiana County to administer and implement the PY 2016 Community Housing Impact and Preservation Program grant if funded by the Ohio Development Services Agency, Office of Community Development, and declaring an emergency.
All right, thank you. Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend council rules so that Resolution number 22 may be considered this evening.
Well, with this, given the type of resolution it is, we don't need to have that. You can just ask that it
Just
be.
move to have it read?
Yes, please.
Certainly. Mr. President, I move that the clerk read Resolution 22 in its entirety this evening.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please read resolution number 22 in its entirety this evening?
Being a resolution commending Mike Burns for his dedicated service to the city of Salem as an employee of the Salem Fire Department from March 10th, 1992 to April 1st, 2016. Whereas the members of the Salem City Council wish to express our appreciation and commend Mike Burns for his dedicated service. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Salem, Columbiana County, Ohio, that this council does for its members and for the citizens of City of Salem pay tribute to Mike Burns for his dedicated service to the City of Salem as an employee of the Salem Fire Department from March 10th, 1992 to April 1st, 2016.
All right, thank you. That concludes the introduction of ordinances and resolutions. Oh, go ahead and Call the roll on that, please.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Passes with 5 yeas. That concludes introduction of ordinances and resolutions. Move on to the pleasure of council. Mr. Whitehill.
Nothing this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Brown?
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Mrs. Dickey?
First of all, I want to thank everybody for their prayers and good wishes during my husband's surgery and illness recently. We really appreciate it. It's nice that people remember us and take the time to make those wishes. The other thing is that in regard to what Mrs. Popa had said tonight, we really do need to seriously look at each of our communities. Things have gotten pretty run down in areas. Some areas are absolutely beautiful, but it only takes one in a neighborhood to run down the property values. And so what I would like to suggest, because I spent a lot of time on Saturday with the nice weather, not only working in my own yard, but looking around in my ward. I also went and visited for about an hour a resident in the second ward who had some problems in her neighborhood. And I know it's a huge problem. And what I hated to say to her was, yes, you have problems here, and yes, I wouldn't like to live next to what you're complaining about. The bad thing is hers was not nearly the worst place in the city, and not even the worst place in my ward. And so what I would like to really say to people is, the only way I know to really start to fix this problem is to be a neighbor again. Know your neighbors. It is a whole lot easier to work with them if you know who they are, if you're willing to lend a hand back and forth, both you giving and receiving when you need it. Having a good example by your own property is nice, but it doesn't go far enough. If your neighbors don't know you, they don't care about you, and they don't respect your property values as much as if they really get to know you. I would really like to see people to look around in their neighborhoods and say, what's wrong with the old concept of block parties and cleanup days? And somebody take the lead in your neighborhood, not just somebody, you do it. Take the lead in your neighborhood to reach out and lend a hand to your neighbors. And when you see a need, say, hey, I noticed that your grass was a little long, and I'm not complaining, but is there a problem? Do you need help? Is your lawnmower broken? Have you had a health issue? You know, what's going on in your neighborhood that's causing these problems? And everybody pitch in. You know, pretty soon people take pride. They like to see their places look good. The other thing that I want to say is, we really need to give more thought and really give some action to this landlords program, because a lot of these areas are places that are rentals. You know, if it's not where you live, you don't care as much. You don't care as long as you make that money. And so this is a real issue in our city. I just really reach out to people to take the initiative and start that action in your own neighborhoods. Thank you.
Mr. Gall.
The Rules and Ordinance Committee met tonight and received a request from the fire chief that I'm hoping other people will consider and give the committee their input in the next 2 weeks. The request is to reduce the maximum age in which we can hire a fireman, which presently is age 40. And it's been requested to reduce it to age 33. And there are so many comments made on that issue as to pension, as to health, safety. It's tough for me to think that we can't hire somebody that's 34 years old to be a fireman. But at the same time, because you have to at least be 58 before you can retire now under the state pension program. I hope that the folks between ages 33 and 40 let the members of the committee, particularly the chairman, Mrs. Dickey. I find it a very interesting question, and I hope to have input from lots of different folks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Paparotis.
No comments tonight. Thank you.
All right. I have no comments this evening, therefore the meeting's adjourned.